Hello and welcome to this edition of SchoolVibe Podcast. I am your host, Daryl Loy. I am the founder and principal partner at the Modern Learning Collaborative. I know what you're thinking, Daryl, what is the Modern Learning Collaborative? Well, we'll get into that a little bit, so stick with me through the end of the episode and we'll talk about that. I did not start a particular record button, so we're going to do that all over again. Give me 1 second. I'm going to start this to record. Hello and welcome to this edition of the SchoolVibe Podcast. I am your host, Daryl Loy. I am the founder and principal partner at the Modern Learning Collaborative. And I know what you're thinking. Daryl, what is the Modern Learning Collaborative? Well, stick with me to the end of the episode and I will talk a little bit more about that, introduce that to you, maybe even talk about some ways that we might partner together and in the future. So show of hands, excuse me, how many out there are completely surprised to see a new episode of the SchoolVibe Podcast in your podcast player? Yeah, that would be me even. So I launched this podcast a couple years ago when I was Director of Technology, Director of Modern Learning at Good Shepherd Episcopal School in Dallas. I had a co-host with me who worked with me as the curriculum director at Good Shepherd. And then she moved along to another school, a couple of other opportunities. But that was Andrea Jenkins. She was my co-host previously. really enjoyed that time. And if you are out there and you're a fan of that show and the conversations that Andrea and I had, the banter back and forth that Andrea and I had, thank you for being a part of that. I am referring to this as a relaunch of the School Vibe podcast. Those of you who are listening via audio only, will not know, but I will have a link in the show notes that I am actually streaming this live via YouTube as well. Now, my hope is to do this live stream every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central Time. That's my goal. Today, it was about 4:30 before we kicked off, maybe a little bit later, and I chalked that up to technical difficulties. So if you know anything about technology at all, you know that those things do in fact happen. So I'm hung up on a couple of things, or was, before we launched this. Obviously, I missed the, well, those of you who are listening audio only don't realize this, but if you're watching the video, you'll know that I missed starting the record process on one of my pieces of gear here that captures the audio. So minor details, technical issues, still getting some things squared away, not terribly thrilled with the camera angle. So working on a lot of that stuff. And we'll get this ironed out as we go. But again, this is a relaunch of the School Vibe podcast. I want to keep the focus of the podcast pretty similar in that it'll be primarily around news, or as I used to say, news and views that you can use in your day-to-day, whatever that role might be in education. Want to keep that the same. I've got a few articles lined up here to have a conversation about, and just to share with you, point out a few interesting things that I saw in the conversation, or I'm sorry, in the articles. In the future, hope to have some guests. I actually have a surprise interview guest today on the episode. That was another part of the technical difficulties, was getting that interviewee sort of queued up and ready to go. Still not sure that it's ready to go, but we're going to find that out in a little bit. So again, relaunching. I'm calling this season 2. I'm calling this episode 1 of season 2. So this is sort of the second season, if you will, of the School Vibe podcast. Not traditional seasons as a lot of podcasts do, but more along the lines of just sort of a redo. And this is the season that we are in fact in. So I've got articles that I want to talk about. That's one segment. An additional segment that I've sort of added for this new redo. And, you know, these things will vary, and maybe we'll have this in every episode. Maybe we won't. But the additional section that I want to add, in addition to the interview section, is just a section on tips from around the web. Things that I've come across in my day-to-day, which I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read lots of articles. So I've found some interesting things that I want to share. Just one thing every episode. Really want to hope to keep these short and concise. Just want to introduce some topics to you that are in the news and things that might affect education today and into the future. When I get into talking about the Modern Learning Collaborative towards the end of the show, you might understand a little bit more about my focus and the things that I want to talk about here on the podcast. So why don't we jump into this? Let's see how some of this technology is working. So I'm going to jump in right now with the education news and views that you can use. And so these are the articles that I've come across recently. that I'd like to discuss with you. And this first one, well, you should know, when I started doing some research to put this episode together last week, I have a couple of different sources, a couple of different places that I go to looking for content. And it's interesting, I found a couple of really interesting articles on the topic of competency-based learning. You may or may not know much about that, certainly depending upon your background in education, whether you're independent school, public school, whatever the case might be there. But competency-based learning, as this article says, is now a reality in terms of legislation, in terms of the ability to introduce competency-based learning in every state. This article, all states allow competency-based learning. Will it become a reality in schools? So Wyoming, as I understand it, was the last state to sort of allow this concept of learning, this competency-based learning. So they were the last state to make that allowance starting last year. So now every state, all 50 states, have in their, I don't know if you really call it law, it's not law in that it, and we'll get into this in one of the articles, but it's not law in that it is required. It is something that is in fact allowed as an option for learning. And let's jump into that just a little bit. Let's see. We'll jump into that just a little bit. Sorry, getting a little distracted here. This first article, and I'm going to kind of not look at the camera for a second. I'm going to look over here and take a look at this article, because there's a few things I want to point out. This article starts out with just a general description or a general concept of exactly what competency-based learning actually is. Says it's an educational model that allows students to advance and graduate based on their mastery of academic concepts rather than the amount of time they spend in the classroom. So it's not based on how much time they've spent with a particular academic idea, a particular area of academia. It is actually their ability to understand that and to relate that, to be competent in those areas of education. So as you can imagine, it's probably can be very complicated to implement something like this. It's vastly different. It's not based on grade letters. It's truly based on the competency of the student, and that in turn is how they progress basically and move to onto the next area of learning and on to the next or graduate. So a couple of notes from this article. It is definitely more personalized. So it's more personalized than the sort of one-size-fits-all model that we typically see in education today. So normally, the way classes work, and if you know anything about me, you know that I tend to challenge some of the, as I call them, rituals, or some people call them traditions of education today. I like to challenge things like the 45-minute class schedule, 50-minute class block, the standardized testing, a lot of those functions of education today. I like to challenge those, but you know that by and large in the education model today, whether it's private school, public school, or what, charter school, some of the other options out there, it tends to be a one-size-fits-all, meaning you've got anywhere from 15 kids in a classroom to, in the public school environment, sometimes it's upwards of 30 kids in a classroom. The teacher is teaching, and basically it is what it is. And there is no personalization. Every student in the classroom, regardless of their level of maturity, regardless of their understanding of the content, regardless of their ability or interest in the topic or their ability to learn, they're all held to that same one size fits all standard, meaning that we start the class and with chapter 1 in the book, and we move through the grading period, whether that be a quarter or a trimester, and then we end up in chapter 6 of the book, and no variation one way or the other. That's not all schools. I'm not here to say that that's all schools, but by and large, most of the experiences in the classroom today are, in fact, sort of one size fits all. So that's where this competency-based approach differs drastically. It's very personalized. So the teacher can have a number of students in the classroom working on different projects. We'll get into that in one of the other articles, but they quote a number of folks in this article. One is the Utah State Superintendent, Sydney Dixon. She says, and I thought this was very funny and very interesting, for many, many years, we have been driven by what I call the 3 B's, and those are buses, bells, and butt time, or time in seats. And that's really what's driven public education for a very long time. So this idea of competency-based learning will definitely shift the focus away from time in the seats, and again, personalize it significantly. Now, every state has a different starting point for this competency-based education. It's again, it is not the one-size-fits-all model and approach. So not everyone's going to want to start or be able to start in the same place, and it's not also something that students who are 16, 17, 18 years old will start in the same place as students who are, 10, 11, 12 years old. So, but one of the article talks about one of the common entry points, rather, I'll get my diction correct. One of the common entry points is the idea of creating a portrait of a graduate. Now, that's a high-level document developed by all of your constituents, the educators, the parents, community members, and even the students, that outline the core competencies or broad skills that every successful high school graduate should leave with. And I think that's key to developing this this idea of competency-based learning. And so that's a great place to start, a portrait of graduate. Now, we've done this kind of work in some of the independent schools I've been a part of. I think it's an excellent tool to have, particularly in independent schools where there are no standards necessarily related to curriculum like there are in public schools. So you need to define what the graduate of your institution really looks like, and what sort of, in this case, what sort of competencies you expect them to graduate with. So that's a great place to start. The article mentions that a great deal here. So there's obviously some challenges. In 2012, Maine became the first state who actually went down the road to require. Now, as I said earlier, it's not that way now, but in 2012, they went down the road to require every student to show proficiencies in 8 core content areas in order to earn their high school diploma. And as you might imagine, if you've worked in education for any length of time, forcing certain drastic shifts, which I believe this would be considered a very drastic shift, um, forcing that kind of model or participation, sometimes it doesn't work out very well. And that's kind of what happened in Maine, according to this article. There were issues along the way. There was some of them were challenging the definition of proficient. You know, they didn't really have a clear definition of what that was, so that made it difficult to assess the kids and where they were. So those are some of the challenges associated with any sort of competency based approach to education. But um, that I found that this particular article that approached it from a very broad perspective was in fact interesting. I don't know that I knew that all states basically were open to and allowed to use a competency based approach. The next article, which I found interesting, also based in on the idea of competency based learning, they took a sort of a deep dive into one district and their experiment with this competency-based approach. And school in Pennsylvania, and I love what they refer to it. They refer to their competency-based program as Moonshot. So the superintendent of this particular district, her name was Laura Jacobs, or is Laura Jacobs. The article says it was her bid to bust through what she sees as outdated artificial barriers in K-12 education, between different academic subjects, between age-based grade levels. And if you know me, I've talked at length about the idea that the grouping kids in grades by age doesn't really make a lot of sense today. So she has an issue with that. And then just understanding the difference between an A student and the kid with a solid string of C's. That doesn't necessarily mean that one student is smarter than the other. And this idea of competency-based approach might, in fact, be a better assessment for a student's level of understanding. She says those structures can stymie the kind of individualized deep learning students need to become critical, creative thinkers in the digital age. Again, I'm very much a proponent of what I call the 5 C's of education, which are curiosity, creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. So this is basically a deep dive into this Moonshot program. She kicked this off. It's been a couple of years now. I want to say I read that they're in their 3rd year. And it is strictly voluntary. It's voluntary from a student and family perspective. So she has 2 teachers who run this program. I think they started in year 1 with 25 students, and this year 3 they're now at 75 students who are participating in the program. So I would think that's pretty successful. But it's strictly voluntary. They meet with families who are considering this, make sure that that they understand exactly what it is. As she says, the switch to competency-based education asks people to give up those sacred rituals, and that's kind of hard for some parents. That's down in the article a bit. They talk about some of the challenges. Let me get down to that section. The grading aspect has been seen as a source of friction, and that's something that parents have a tendency to hang on to. Without grades, how are colleges and universities going to be able to assess their child's ability to be successful and to be um, asked to come to particular universities. If they don't have that grade point average or those grades to actually look at. So that's one of the biggest sources of friction, as the article refers to it. This, I will say that there is, in fact, there is, in fact, a program out there. It's a consortium of both public and private schools. It's called the Master Consortium or the Master Transcript Consortium. It's a group, as I said, it's a group of public and private schools who have come together to create this alternative high school transcript that is based on mastery, not based on GPA or grade point average. And they're working very diligently. I think it was begun. The work was begun in 2017, and actually Andrea Jenkins, my former co-host, is the one that introduced me to this concept a number of years ago, or told me about this project that they're working on, because we were having some conversations with her as director of curriculum, me as director of technology, director of modern learning. We were having those conversations about what can we do and how can we change what we're doing in school today to offer more modern learning environments and modern learning concepts, tools, techniques, all of that in place of more of the traditional, here's a 50-minute block of time and you've got to go over here and sit in this space and learn about English for 50 minutes. And then you've got to, at the end of that 50 minutes, you've got to stop thinking about English, get up from that space, go over to this space, sit down. And now for the next 50 minutes, you've got to think about history and nothing else. Those are not modern constructs. Those are not modern real world things. Students, when they graduate from high school and or go on to college and graduate from college, and they get into the workforce, there's no 50-minute block of time. There is no project that focuses on a single source of content. You've got to be able to exercise all of those soft skills when approaching your projects and things like that you're working on. So Andrea and I were having a lot of those deep conversations back in the day, and she brought this master transcript consortium up to me. And again, they are working hard to bridge that gap between a traditional high school transcript and this competency-based transcript that universities can, in fact, use to assess a student's ability to join their institution. Now, honestly, it's not new for universities because I think over certainly the last, I'd say 10 years, more and more universities have had to deal with the concept of homeschool students. And they don't have necessarily a traditional transcript to choose from either. So it's not necessarily a stretch for universities to really be able to evaluate students based on competency. But also, I'd like to throw out that it's not necessarily the only option for students to graduate high school. It isn't today. The world we live in is not. It's not that of as a lot of schools have in their mission statements. It's not a world of schools being college preparatory any longer, because you don't have to have a college degree to do well in this country, to do well in the world. You just simply don't, especially if you've come through programs like we're talking about, competency-based programs where you're taught less about particular topics and expected to understand and sort of regurgitate those on an exam. You're, as opposed to that, you are exposed to those areas and these topics and these concepts that require you to possess those 5 C's, that require you to be curious and to be creative, um, and require you to be critical thinkers, and help you learn to effectively collaborate with folks, because that's what happens in the real world. And if you've gone through a high school program where those soft skills are essential and a cornerstone to your experience, then I think you're much more prepared for um, the workplace when you actually get out into the workplace. And more and more schools are also adopting these modern learning environments, teaching students practical skills. We launched a media arts elective where we spent time teaching 7th and 8th grade students how to do audio production work, how to do video production work, giving them some practical skills. We acquired the equipment and gave them practical experience on how to do these things, which are real world jobs. So if that's where a student's passion is, is college necessary? Don't know. Don't know. I think it's very individualistic, very individual. It's very personalized. And again, back to our topic of competency based learning, it's very personalized. It gives kids the ability to do work on things that they're interested in. And it just sort of changes the playing field. It certainly creates an environment that I believe the students are likely far more engaged in, and therefore I think their education experience is far more relevant. I think that's boils it down, if you will, for me, is really have the desire to create those modern learning environments so that we can very much personalize a student's educational experience, and which just means their engagement goes through the roof. I have so many stories I could share from my 21 years in doing this kind of work, and just the kinds of engagement. I've seen engagement just go off the charts when you start introducing real sort of relevant learning opportunities, real and relevant tools in education and in the modern world, and relate those modern world tools to modern education. So anyway, I thought those were very interesting articles, all about this idea of competency-based learning. I have one more I want to share. I know we're running long. One more I want to share with you, and that is, if I can get back over here and change my slide. I loved this article. This is out of Georgia Tech, and I've been on the Georgia Tech campus. Very historic university, great place. My youngest son is a software developer, programmer. Georgia Tech was very, very high on his list of educational institutions. So we've been there. We did the tour. Great institution. A lot of history there. Yeah, I won't get into all that. That's sort of I don't know, an interest or a pastime of mine is history, and there's a lot of history. Let's just leave it at that. There at Georgia Tech and in the city of Atlanta. But anyway, this article, Georgia Tech to study how to make lifetime learning better. How many times have you heard me say it is so important for students to become lifelong learners? And now Georgia Tech is actually launching a whole new college, the College of Lifetime Learning, that is devoted to this idea of lifelong learning, but also focused very much on the intersection of learning and technology. Basically, what I gathered from the article there, that the average age of college students is going up. A lot of folks are going back to school. A lot of folks are participating in higher education, not to achieve a degree as much as they are to stay current with technology and trends and the things um, that they're working on. So in their real world, and then when they make a shift in their job, how do they get the training for that? So what the research pointed out was that well, let's say 37% of skills for a given job change about every 5 years. So that's some of the research that Georgia Tech was looking at when they began to put together this idea of a lifelong learning, or the College of Lifetime Learning. They say roughly there's 3 million students over the age of 25 who are enrolled in nonprofit colleges and universities to help with that upskilling, or that reskilling, if you will. How do you make sure the average person can stay current in their current or future roles, even if they pivot? And then from a K-12 perspective, how can we help young minds prepare for the world ahead? I'll talk a little more about the Modern Learning Collaborative, but I will throw out right now that my main focus with that is to help students prepare for the realities of and success in the modern world. So this thing that Georgia Tech is doing, it lines up with that beautifully. They also point out additional data that shows that the U.S. workforce is actually growing older. So there are folks like me who aren't ready to retire. As I heard one older educator say on a podcast today, I still got gas in the tank. So, and I'm still here, ready to do some work and help. Speaking for me personally now, help schools incorporate these modern learning environments into their work. I love this though. I've got to read it. The unique aspect of the Lifetime Learning College is a focus on lifetime learning and the engagement of learners from K to gray. I love that, from K to gray. That right there was the reason I wanted to include this article and talking about this concept today. So it's just, just warms my heart to see that some of the things that I and we have been talking about for years are actually coming to pass. And again, if you've followed me at all, you know that I'm very much a proponent of Sir Ken Robinson and his idea that education is not in need of of a reformation, no reform. They are more certainly in need of a radical transformation. And this competency-based learning, this focus on lifelong learning, those are the kinds of things that will lead, in my opinion, to some radical transformation in education. All right. Let's move along. Oh, I may have to stop here for a second and get this other document up, but I want to talk about, let me take a second, see if I can find that real quickly. And it is here. Let me open this document and I'm going to go here. So as I said earlier, I listen to a lot of podcasts throughout the day as I travel back and forth, visiting with clients and whatnot. One of the ones that I really enjoy listening to is the Easy EdTech podcast with Dr. Monica Burns. And she had a recent episode, looks like it's episode number 284, um, that she talked about, and I love this. She talked about 8 chatbot prompts that families will love. Um, I think there's so many things that I love about this. Let me get this document up here so I can um, actually read about that. But I love this in that we all know that AI began to dominate the conversation in education a little over a year ago, maybe probably a year and a half or so ago. Um, Actually, probably now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably more like 2 years ago when ChatGPT was introduced. And so, man, it became such a huge topic of conversation in the schools that I was in and schools that I was partnering with. Um, I spoke to a group of parents at a local elementary school probably about 6 or 8 months ago, and while I was talking primarily about education technology, modern learning, and creating those environments, the topic of conversation around AI did in fact come up. In fact, I had a pastor walk up to me after my session and wanted to have some additional conversations around the use of AI, around is this reasonable and ethical use of this technology? He said he knew lots of pastors who were using ChatGPT to help them develop their sermons. And personally, you know, I don't think there's an issue with that. I don't think there's an issue with teachers using ChatGPT or other large language model AIs to help with the work that they do on a regular basis. In fact, I think it probably helps um, with their overall workload in order to free up a little more time to maintain and reestablish or establish more deeper relationships with their students. And really, when you get right down to it, yes, the kids are there to learn things, and that's what education is about. But so much of the real heart of education centers around that relationship between the teacher and the student. And that's probably one of the reasons why private school models tend to thrive for some, more so because class sizes tend to be a little bit smaller and those relationships can be a bit deeper. But I digress a little bit here. But AI and ChatGPT and those kinds of tools can help teachers with their workload, with the development of their curriculum, with specifically with the development of their day-to-day implementation and their coverage of all of their curricular goals. It can help with all of that kind of work, and we're even seeing some uh, teachers actually use AI in the assessment aspect as well. Um, Not that they're uploading students' papers with names and all that kind of stuff. There's still certainly safe practices around the use of AI, but it can certainly help evaluate a student's writing without necessarily using specific student data involved, and help um, the teacher with the assessment of that work. Um, is it always right? Absolutely not. Again, there's certainly safety concerns and things like that to consider when you're using that tool in the classroom, but it's there. Your kids are going to use it. Your kids are absolutely going to use it. So it's just another one of those aspects of education that we can't sort of adopt the ostrich principle. We can't just stick our heads in the sand and hope that this stuff goes away, because it's not going to. Um, Boy, have I got something to share with you on next week's episode that I just came across. Unbelievable in terms of the area of AI. But back to this particular article I want to share with you. Again, Dr. Monica Burns and her podcast, the Easy Ed Tech podcast, she has laid out these chatbot prompts that I love that will help parents engage with ChatGPT and understand its role, its value, and hopefully give them a little more insight into how it can be used effectively, even in their day to day lives, as well as they have. I think it would lead to them having less of a reluctant feeling towards it when teachers are teaching students how to use it and B, actually using it in their own course of work. But I got to jump into these because I think they're just great. You can see, I think she's got a transcript on her website related to this episode, so you can see all of these. I just want to hit a few of them because I think they're just a great way for families and to sort of engage with technology and their students. So storytelling together, it says write a story with once upon a time, and then you insert a particular topic that your student or your child is actually interested in, or create a story with your child's favorite animal as the main character. One other one, invent a superhero with the power of, and then add some sort of superpower that you want to this superhero to have in the story. So just a lot of fun just to sit around and generate these things with your kids and see what pops up. Exploring history. This was a great one. What happened in history on this day? Ask that of ChatGPT. See what you get. Tell me about a famous person that was born, either today's date or insert your child's date. My birthday is February 27th. So who famous was born on my birthday? So that's interesting. Let's see another way. Let's see, exploring history. Explain the events that led up to, and then insert a particular moment in history. So it's easy for and insert the grade level or the age of your child to understand. So you're framing the prompt. You're informing the prompt that your student is this age, and we want to learn about this particular event in history, but in a way that my child specifically can understand. Fascinating use. Homework help. Explain. And in parentheses, she's got here tricky homework concept in simple terms. So use it as a homework aid. One of the most interesting conversations about this early on was with Matt Miller and a webinar that he ran, and he challenged folks on that webinar. If a kid uses a tutor, do we have an issue with that? Kids use tutors all the time. Well, what is AI if it's not potentially just another tutor? Parents help kids with homework all the time. What's the difference? So so use it as a homework help. Science explorers. Here's the prompt. We have, and then list some food item in our refrigerator. What can we cook for dinner tonight? So let's see. Tell me about a specific science concept and how it impacts my child and me on a daily basis. So, what can we talk about? El Nino from a weather perspective. Tell me about El Nino and how that impacts my child and me on a daily basis. Let's see. Global connections. This one's fascinating because we talk all the time about the ability that technology gives us to connect with folks next door, in the class across the hall, in the school down the street, or in the school halfway around the world. So what's the weather like and pick another country right now? or teach me how to say hello in 5 different languages. So that's just some great prompts here for families and their kids to use, which just phenomenal in engaging parents, kids with technology. It sort of brings up that whole level of understanding and with respect to technology and education. I just love that she has introduced these as a way to help bridge that gap that we often see. We have so often we have parents pulling back from technology, and that's fine. I understand it's not for everybody, and that there are classical schools out there, and those are certainly places that students can thrive. But I am of the opinion that we as educators and as educational institutions are here to prepare our students for the future, and ignoring technology and its impact um, on a daily basis, I think that is detrimental to students, to say the least. So she closes out with a few things she calls silly stuff. Write a song about, and then some topic to the tune of, and then a very popular song. This one was fun. I may have to do this one myself. Create 5 knock jokes on, and then say a topic. So I wonder what it would do about 5 knock jokes on the topic of education technology. Maybe we'll have to ask it. Let's see. Write a poem or riddle about a topic that I can share with my age level or grade level child. So she just ends up with some fun things about that. She's got, I think I heard her talk about on her episode. I don't have that up in front of me, but I think I heard her talk about um, the fact that she has a book, or she recommends a book that has just a ton of these prompts available, both for families, for the classroom. Yeah, I'm looking on in the episode resources related to this one. She's got a link to a blog post: 50 ChatGPT prompts for teachers, 10 unexpected prompts to try in ChatGPT. So yeah, she's got some great resources out there. So I highly recommend, first of all, I just recommend her podcast in general. I think I always take away nuggets when I listen to her podcast. So this one I just found very interesting. Love the idea of prompts that families can use to engage with their kids and technology. So just phenomenal, just phenomenal. All right, let's take a look. I think that I am ready to jump into. I have an interview. I have a special guest that I wanted to bring into the podcast today. Don't know how this is going to go. Part of the technical difficulties that I was experiencing just before we jumped in, because my special guest on the episode today is, wait for it. Let me flip back here, and I will switch to the camera that will show you who my guest is. Yes, my guest today is ChatGPT. Don't know. It looks like that ChatGPT is actually listening to me now. Not what I expected, but in order to get um, in order to have this conversation and be able to hear ChatGPT, I'm going to put on my headphones. So let's jump in. Well, see, this is part of my challenge here, because earlier today, hang on, ChatGPT, going to turn you off for just a second. So apparently, between preparing for this a couple of days ago and today, they've made some pretty significant modifications in this tool. So if you didn't know, the actual Chat GPT application on your phone has a voice AI option where you can have a conversation with Chat GPT. So ChatGPT is my guest on the podcast today. So let's I'm going to activate this and we're going to see how this goes. Going to wait for a second, and I believe ChatGPT is with me now. Hello, ChatGPT, and welcome to the School Vibe podcast.
Hello, Daryl. It's great to be here on the School Vibe podcast. I'm looking forward to our conversation. What would you like to discuss today?
Well, the first few articles that I discussed on the podcast today was all about competency-based learning. So what are your views? And let's start with your definition of competency-based learning.
Competency-based learning is an educational approach that allows students to progress at their own pace as they demonstrate mastery of specific skills and knowledge. Instead of moving forward based solely on time spent in class, students advance when they can show that they understand the material thoroughly. This model promotes personalized learning and ensures that students grasp concepts before moving on, which can lead to deeper understanding and engagement. How do you see this approach fitting into today's educational landscape?
Well, ChatGPT, I think it's a very important part.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now.
Yeah,
Did
see,
not understand what you said.
that's where we are with technology and this thing that I started to use today. But I believe competency-based education is a step towards true transformation of education today. So I think it plays a major role in education.
Absolutely. Competency based education can really transform how we view student progress and learning. By focusing on mastery rather than just seat time, it allows for a more personalized experience that can better prepare students for the complexities of the modern world. It aligns well with the needs of today's learners, especially in an age where critical thinking and problem solving are essential. What do you think are some of the biggest hurdles schools face in fully implementing this model?
Well, first of all, I think it's a huge shift from traditional and or ritualistic education. I think there are so many rituals associated with education today that are going to be hard for teachers to overcome, hard for administrators to overcome. How do we run a school that isn't based on students receiving grades A, B, C, D, or F and spending 50-minute blocks of time every day in a subject matter specific time period? So it's a huge shift in the way we do education today. So let me ask you, ChatGPT, what do you think, how is the best way for a school to begin the implementation of competency-based learning?
Starting with a clear plan and strong communication is key. Schools can begin by piloting competency based learning in a few classrooms or grades. This allows teachers to experiment and gather data on what works and what doesn't. Training and professional development for educators are also crucial, so they understand how to assess student mastery effectively. Engaging with parents and the community to explain the benefits and changes can help ease the transition. Gradually expanding the model based on feedback and results can create a smoother implementation process. What strategies do you think could help address the concerns of teachers and parents during this shift?
Well, As we looked at in some of the articles, I do believe it's important to explain to parents that, even with a competency based approach, that their kids are still going to get into the colleges of their choice. They're still going to have the kinds of skills that employers are looking for, if even if they choose not to progress into higher ed. So I think it's important to lay that groundwork. ChatGPT, when I first launched a one-to-one computer program back in the day, we spent a good 2 years laying the groundwork so our constituency completely understood what we were doing and, most importantly, why we were doing it. So I feel like a longer run up to implementing this competency based learning approach, it would certainly be advantageous for all of your constituents, students, parents alike.
That's a great point. Building trust and understanding within the community is crucial for any major educational change. By taking the time to explain how competency based learning prepares students for future opportunities, whether in college or the workforce, schools can alleviate concerns. Your experience with a one to one computer program really highlights the importance of communication and preparation. It helps everyone feel included in the process and makes the transition smoother. What do you think are some key messages to focus on when communicating with families about this shift?
Oh, clearly, I would say your kid's going to be fine. Your kid's smart. Your kid is resourceful. They're going to have the skills necessary to be successful in life. Yeah, I think that's it. And those are certainly some of the key points I would stress to parents. And then obviously have that conversation with um, at some point colleges and universities, if that's the path that students want to take, then those colleges and those universities need to understand that these kids are in fact prepared, even though you don't see a transcript with an A in algebra 2, or a B, or in my case a C or a D, maybe, I don't know, but you're not going to see that traditional transcript, and kids can still thrive in your educational institution.
Absolutely. Reassuring parents that their children will still be well prepared for college or careers is essential. Emphasizing that competency based learning can cultivate important skills like problem solving and critical thinking can help them understand its value. Engaging with colleges and universities to establish their recognition of this model will also be vital in gaining acceptance. It sounds like you have a solid approach to addressing concerns. How do you think schools can best showcase the successes of students in competency based programs to build further confidence in this model?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge. I don't know that there are enough schools that are participating in trials of this kind of learning model. So I think it's going to take some time. Again, that long run up to making sure
Incoming
that
voice call.
yeah, making sure that that's the other challenge of dealing with this. Hang on, I'm not finished here. Chat GPT, give me
There
just
are
a second.
robust data and success stories to share is really important.
Okay. Yep.
Schools can start small, gather evidence of student achievements, and share those successes through community events or social media. Over time, as more schools adopt competency based learning, there will be a growing body of evidence demonstrating its effectiveness. That gradual accumulation of success stories will help build confidence among parents and educational institutions alike. What kind of metrics do you think schools should focus on when measuring success in a competency based learning model?
Well, that's the question. I think assessment is a huge hurdle, in understanding assessments, developing assessments. What do assessments look like in a competency based learning approach. What, in your estimation, ChatGPT, are some of the best ways to assess a student's success in a competency based learning model?
In a competency based learning model, assessments should focus on demonstrating mastery rather than traditional tests. Some effective methods could include performance based assessments, where students complete real world tasks related to the competencies being taught. Portfolios are another great option, allowing students to showcase their work over time and reflect on their learning. Additionally, formative assessments can be used to provide ongoing feedback, helping students identify areas for improvement before they move on. It's important that assessments are varied and aligned with the competencies to ensure a comprehensive understanding. How do you see these assessment methods fitting into your vision of competency based learning?
Oh, I think you've done a great job in outlining a few of those assessment tools. So thank you for that input. And you know what? We're going to go ahead and wrap up this segment of the podcast. So ChatGPT, I just want to say thank you for being a guest on the episode today, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Daryl. It was a pleasure to be part of the episode and discuss competency based learning with you. I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay, so ChatGPT is now gone, and so that was I thought it might be an interesting little hoop to jump through. I teased a little bit earlier that I have something else to share of significance for next week's episode around this whole AI thing. I was blown away when I heard this. So be sure to come back and next week and see me with, and let's talk about that. Yeah, it's fascinating, fascinating. All right. So I'm going to wrap up now with just, we're going to take a hot minute here to talk about the work that I am doing with the Modern Learning Collaborative. This is just a snapshot of my website, darylloy.com. And you can learn a great deal more about the Modern Learning Collaborative there. I'm going to take off my headphones because I don't need to hear ChatGPT again now, or my guest, I should say now. But so a lot of you may know, if you follow me on any of the socials, that in April of this year, I stepped away from full-time employment at an educational institution after spending 21 years in that full-time capacity in a total of 3 schools. Started out in 2003 at Fort Worth Academy, um, really thinking that I just needed a job at the time, and I could do this until I could find another real job. And what ultimately I found was a career. I tell everyone all the time, I'm sure you've heard me say this, I was looking for a job when I found a career. So it's really changed my life. But I realized in April of this year, just based on some things happened at Fort Worth Christian. I'm not going to get into a lot of those details here, but I just realized that first of all, I very much have a passion, and I feel a calling for the work of introducing and incorporating technology and modern learning concepts, tools, techniques, whatnot, into into schools and into curriculum, definitely integrated into curriculum, and the experiences that kids have at school. I think there's still, as I said earlier in this episode, even a ton of very ritualistic aspects uh, uh, in schools still every day. So I wanted to step away from working with one school in particular and be able to be in a position to offer my services as a tech director, as a director of modern learning, as someone who is very much interested in the future of education and the in the preparation of our students for, as I said earlier, my little sort of mantra is the realities of and success in the modern world. I think there are a lot of things that are going on in schools today that are great. I love the maker movement. I love the design thinking movement that a lot of schools are incorporating. I think those are all certainly relevant modern approaches to education. Um, I see a lot more project based learning going on, problem or project based approaches to education. I see a lot more personalization. That was the focus of the articles today. Personalization is very important. Technology just fuels that ability to further personalize education for students today. The technology can just greatly empower teachers to do that deep personalization um, for every student in their classroom. It sounds like a lot of work, is a lot of work, but it is possible. And experiential approaches. My youngest attended High Point University in High Point, North Carolina. They are very much an experiential university. Everything that they do is um, is centered around the student and centered around giving those students experiential learning, hands on, in every aspect, every school that every college that they have curriculum in, they do very much that experiential approach to learning, and I think that's very important. So, um, while there are a lot of schools that are doing good work in this area, I think there is a lot of work left to do here. I think there are a number of schools just here in the Fort Worth Dallas Metroplex that um, could use some assistance in developing these modern learning environments, incorporating modern learning approaches to every area of curriculum to to transform the technology department into more of a department of modern learning that focuses on curriculum first, learning first. That was the whole sort of impetus of change that I went through. Is taking the word technology out of the department completely, and put the emphasis back on learning where it belongs. So helping technology departments understand how they could um, be more of a service oriented um, sort of department. And I don't mean because they are service or oriented from in terms of maintaining the network and maintaining devices, but I'm talking about being of service to curriculum and of service directly to students who um, are the recipients of that service. So helping them, um, helping the teachers, sort of really, uh, what's a good word? Sort of really infuse their curriculum with these modern tools and techniques. I think there's just a lot of good work that can be done there. I again call for a radical transformation to education, but I know that we can't just flip a switch today and be in a situation where we're completely trashing everything that's going on in school today and gravitating to something like competency-based learning or modern learning. That's not good for anybody. And as I mentioned, in the programs that I've rolled out, we've never done that. We've taken a long run up to make sure everyone understands exactly why we're doing what we are doing. And I'm here in this role with the Modern Learning Collaborative to help school leadership um, make that transition, start making that transition towards this radical shift that needs to happen in education today. Um, and there are ways to do this from a very introductory level, if you will, rather than flip a switch. Don't be like was it Maine that required competency based learning approaches, and we saw that was in 2012, and obviously they're not doing that today. So that's not going to work. I recognize that, and I certainly, as I said, recognize that and feel like that's not a valid approach to any of this kind of work. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm here to help with that implementation of modern learning environments, because it is important to prepare students for the realities of and success in the modern world. And let's start slowly eliminating some of those educational rituals that have been in place for, I think one of the articles said, a century. My research tells me some of these educational rituals have been in place for a couple hundred years. Um, and I'm serious, a couple hundred years, a lot of what we do in schools today was developed. It kind of blew my mind when I started digging into some of that research. But that's what I'm here to do. I run every Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock. You can sign up for. I do a free masterclass session, Casting a Vision for Modern Learning, where I talk a lot about what it is and why it's important. And then I end up talking about how we can, in fact, partner together and begin to implement some of these changes and really take advantage of where we are in the world from a tech perspective today. Long episode. Thank you for hanging in there with me. Um, um, this is the new revised relaunch of SchoolVibe podcast. I appreciate you being with me. There will be more to come. Again, I am streaming live on YouTube. Again, the goal is to go live about 4 o'clock Central Time every Wednesday. So if you're listening to the audio only version of this, I'll post a link to the SchoolVibe YouTube channel, so you can subscribe there and get a notification when I am ready to go live. And you'll see that, and you'll see me in my little studio here. I hope to have other guests on who are not AI. So I'm talking to some other educational leaders in this modern sort of learning space, and hoping to get some of those folks on for future episodes. So you'll see those as well. So yeah, feel free to check out the YouTube channel and take a look, and you'll be able to see and follow along some of those resources there. So check out Dr. Monica Burns' Easy Ed Tech podcast, and take a look at some of those other programs that we've talked about in the news articles today, and know that I desperately want you to be different. I want you to be someone who stands out in education. I want you to be someone who is a champion for your students and for the future of education, and not participating in the ostrich principle and hoping that all this stuff goes away, and you're actually here to understand how to implement that on behalf of your students so that we can prepare them for the realities of and success in the future. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you next time.